So that is the kind of the key motivation. And so I thought I'll cover that because the first week's lecture was primarily a broad introduction to queuing. And so this is what we have, right? In a queue, we will have, let's say, elements here, and okay, so I will kind of solve some problems this week and in the following weeks, problems related to queuing theory. I might use a book that I am familiar with, which I studied from. It is freely available on. I will use this book by Burtsekis and Gallagher. It is freely available online, made public by the authors themselves. I have shared a link to the book and the solution manual, both of which are publicly available. It is shared in the Drive link. So all of you will have received a Drive link, if not today, by tomorrow. You'll receive a Drive link with the materials that I'm going to use for each week. So that Drive link will contain, so particularly chapter 3 from that book I've indicated over there. So that is on queuing theory, and that has many excellent problems on queuing theory. A little bit focused on networks, but it has many good general problems as well. So I will be taking up like one particular problem, or like a few problems here and there from that book in general. So in a queue, what you have is, you have so packets or people or whatever, they will be arriving at some rate, lambda, let's say lambda per second, right, per second. And they will be departing at a rate mu per second. An example from network's point of view can be, let's say there is one user A, another user B, and then you are kind of, you are both connected to Wi-Fi, and so there is a Wi-Fi router here. There's a Wi-Fi router here. And then, so let's say you are sending something to user A, sending something to user B using the Wi-Fi, then it is going through the router, right? So it is going to the router, through the router. And so the router will maintain something like a queue where packets will be coming in at a rate, let's say lambda per second, and it will leave at a rate mu per second. So this is kind of realistic problems can be modeled with queues, right? And so the very first, so we have learned about something called Kendall's notation, right? Kendall's notation. Something like A, B, C, D, E, where each of these have their own meanings, right? What are the meanings here? Let's revisit. One second. Okay. So Kendall's notation is A, B, C, D, E. A is, one second. Kind of forgotten the exact formula here. Yeah, right. So A is the way the inter-arrival time is distributed. So let's say two packets arrive at, let's say I have packet 1, packet 2 arriving at a router. So this arrives at T1, this arrives at time T2. So then I have the inter-arrival time t, which is t2 minus t1. This is a random variable in itself, right? What distribution will it follow? So that distribution, it follows, so it is indicated in this notation A. So this is arrival distribution. And then B is the service time distribution. And C is number of servers operating in parallel, right? So remember that D and E are usually optional, right? So D denotes system capacity, that is of Q, actually, capacity of Q. So I might have a Q where I can say that, okay, I'll admit only, let's say my capacity is 5. So it's something like capacity K, something like 5, C equal to 5. So I can only accommodate 5 people in the queue or 5 packets in the buffer, network buffer, whatever be the situation you are considering, not more. So if there is a 6th person coming in the queue, I'll have to ask that 6th person to leave, right? So after 5, I won't accept anymore. So now at this point, then this buffer is full or this queue is full. I'll have to reject everybody coming after them, right? And E is order of service. Order of service. So by default, the value of D is infinity. This is the default. So by default, I'll assume that there is no constraint on the queue capacity. And then E is again FCFS by default. By FCFS, what do I mean? It is first come, first serve, right? So that is the normal behavior of a queue, right? Anywhere in real life, whosoever comes into queue enters the queue first will also leave the queue first. First customer will be served first. So this is kind of assumed as default. So you can, and the default assumption is capacity of queue. So let us go to some common queuing types and understand them using Kendall's notation. So the first type is MM1. So M here denotes the exponential random variable. So can somebody explain using Kendall's notation, like you have studied? So yeah, so then this is actually one of the most common kinds of queues, MM1 queue. So what this queue means is that any incoming packet is coming in exponential time interval. So this, as I was saying, packet 1 is coming in time t1, packet 2 is coming in time t2. Then this time interval t2 minus t1 is a random variable, right? And similarly, let's say packet, and we are, what are the things we are assuming by default here? We are assuming that the capacity of the queue is infinity. So we have infinite capacity. We won't have to stop at, let's say, the 5th packet or something like that. We can keep on accommodating as many people in the queue as we can. And then we are also assuming first come, first serve service. So let's say packet 1 or let's say even person 1 enters the queue at time t1, leaves the queue t11, let's say, leaves the queue at time t12. Person 2 enters the queue at time t21, leaves the queue at time t22. So t1, which is the inter-arrival time, that is t21 minus t11, t2, let's say this is okay. and T2 is T22 minus T12. This is inter arrival, and this is inter departure, right? And so both of these random variables, inter arrival and inter departure, are exponential random variables. Okay, so this is the meaning of mm. So we understood m. One denotes that at any point I will have, so that is C. So at any point I'll have one server, right? So what does that mean? That at any time only one packet will, let's say we are talking about a queue in the, like in a shop, where, so you have a shop, you have just one cashier, right? And everybody is in a queue. So then that is you can kind of approximate it as mm1 queue, because let's say the cashier is, let's say, somebody very unreliable, so very moody kind of a person. So you don't really know how much time they will take to complete the and also it depends on, let's say, how many orders a person has, right? So that is the time it will take to check out that person. So that can be a random variable. You can model it as an exponential random variable. But this one quantity denotes that you have only one cashier. So if you have two cashiers at the exit of a mall, let's say, so then you will have mm2. So because there are two people serving the customers in the queue. Similarly, so you can have, yeah, so similarly you can have other models. So MM1 is a popular queuing model. Another is MM infinity. So here the only difference is you have infinite number of cashiers. So that is a modification, a twist. That, like, if there are more passengers, they will always find another cashier who is free. So it just yeah, so it is kind of an important notation to keep in mind. MM infinity. And then another form of a queue is MM, let's say, something like this. So what will this mean? We already know the meaning of these two capital M's, which is that the arrival and the departure, the inter departure time, yeah. The service times are exponentially distributed, right? The amount of time it takes to serve each of these users. So on top of that, you are told that you have M servers. So let's say M cashiers, right? And there is also a certain capacity of M. So you cannot, let's say, so this essentially means that the M plus 1th customer will leave, something like that, because you have a queue capacity of M. So let's say you are monitoring the line and you see that there are M number of customers already in the queue, you will not build the queue any further. You will ask the other customers to leave, something like that. It's not realistic for the mall scenario, but it is sometimes really realistic for networks, let's say, right? You might have a router with a limited buffer capacity. So there is a capacity limit and you cannot accommodate packets beyond that limit, because you will be exceeding the memory, the buffer memory and things like that. So this is another model. So this is a quick revision on Kendall's notation of queues. Like, this is how you will see your problems will be like in any book. you will get that you will be told that, okay, you have an MM1 queue with these properties, etc., etc., and you will have to solve problems based on that. Okay. Is this more or less clear?
Yeah, I understood this implementation.
Okay. 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 So let's again think about some basic issues with queues, right? So firstly, is any customer in the queue bound? So let's say I have a queue again. I'll just draw some queue. Let's say I pick this customer. Okay, this is some person P standing in the queue. Is this person bound to? So this person clearly has entered the queue at some point and is waiting in turn, right? Because this is P3, then I have P2 and P1 are ahead of P3 are ahead of P3. So is P3 bound to wait in the queue until P1 and P2 are served? Is it always the case? So my question is, will P3 always wait for P2 or P1? Any answers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I think so. Yeah, P2 and P1.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually I don't know actually.
Yeah. So that is the common sense answer you would think. But then you are operating under a few assumptions. You are assuming that number one, service is first come, first serve. This might not be true in general. I can have different policy, right? I can also so I can assign priorities to customers, right? Let's say P3 is some high priority customer, high priority. Now, in context of networks, you can imagine this to be some kind of high priority traffic, like some kind of danger notification or something that is emergency, while the persons ahead, P1 and P2, are low priority. They are the usual communication stuff. So we might have a policy where we introduce these priorities, and so this high priority traffic might jump ahead of the queue and be served first. So that is a possibility. So this is one. First come, first serve might not be true always. Priorities, just kind of noting this down, we can have different priorities, etc. Secondly, impatient customers, right? We can have this customer who, let's say, has some kind of constraint on time. Let's say some capital T is the max waiting time for this person, right? For P3. So if P3, because of whatsoever reason, ends up waiting more than T duration, P3 will immediately exit the queue. This is the nature of this person, very impatient. So he or she will just leave the queue. Will not bother about service. So this is, yeah, you can, like a real life case, you can think that this is some customer in a shop who has just picked up one item and then he sees the queue is long and so he thinks that, okay, leave it. This is not important to me anyway, so he just leaves. So you can have these cases where the person might not wait. So yeah, this kind of thinking is also important when you are, and this is also important for your learning purpose. Like when you are thinking of queues, you have to think of real situations and you have to devise queuing models that will kind of cater to all these kinds of different situations, right? So yeah, so this is one more thing that I thought I'll cover. And now you have something known as Little's law, right? So what does Little's law say? Can somebody tell? Has anybody studied? So let's Little's law. Right, and so you have, again, I'll draw a queue, and you have packets coming in at a rate of packets service rate is mu uh, per second, and incoming arrival rate is lambda per second, right? So you have packets coming in at a rate lambda per second. Now, we don't know what distribution this follows. This can be Gaussian, this can be exponential, this can be anything. But the mean, the average, like average arrival rate of whatever be the probability distribution is lambda average service rate is mu. Okay. So we don't know the probability distributions. It's not necessary. The law, the proof of the law doesn't require that, right? One important thing to note here is that if average arrival rate is lambda, then typically average time between two arrivals or inter-arrival time will be 1 by lambda. You can also find it as inter-arrival time. So in your problem, you can be given something like, let's say, a passenger, a passenger comes to the bus stop every 2 seconds, let's say. So then from there, you can calculate the arrival rate, lambda, to be, the average time is 1 by lambda, which is equal to 2, let's say. So then you can compute lambda to be half, something like that. So I'm just kind of trying to show how we will solve a problem. So if you're given that the inter-arrival time is 2 seconds, you can compute the arrival rate from there, right? And similarly, average service rate is mu, which means that average service rate is mu per second, which means average time to complete service is equal to 1 by mu. So in the same example, bus example, let's say there is a bus coming, so there is a bus coming every 1 minute, let's say. So then your average time to complete service, which is a bus is a bad example. Let's say let's say there is a motorbike. So you can only take one person on the motorbike. So this is kind of a motorbike station. So a motorbike comes in and it picks up a person and leaves. So there is a motorbike coming in every 1 minute, let's say, to pick up passengers. So then In seconds, this will be 60 seconds. So you can kind of calculate this as 60. And so your service rate will be 1 in 60, which means you will be picking up one passenger every 50 seconds, right? And then so the mu will be 1 by 60. So these are the two most important quantities, arrival rate and service rate, that characterize any queue, right? And so as a layman, you want to figure out how much time you will have to wait in the bus stop, or how much time you'll have to wait in a queue. So that is given by something known as Little's law, which is, so you have L equal to lambda times W, where L is number of number of entities, let's say in queue, lambda, as we know, is lambda is arrival rate, and W is the waiting time. You can check out proofs of this, but essentially it kind of makes intuitive sense that on an average, if lambda people arrive and each one of them has to wait W amount of time on an average, then at any instant, the average number of people in the queue will be the arrival rate times the waiting time. So this applies to, this applies to any distribution, any queue, this is a very general, powerful theorem that you can use for like anything. It doesn't matter whether the incoming outgoing distribution is exponential Gaussian. It is not dependent on that. It is generally holds for any kind of a system. And you can treat every part independently. It depends on what system you are considering. You can kind of model just the part before and apply Little's law over here. So you want to find out the average waiting time before you even get into the queue. That you want to figure out. You can model the queue before the service. So you have, this is arrival, this is queue, and this is server, right? Server. So you can model the arrival plus queue together. So you want to figure out the average waiting time before I get a chance to be served. And then you can also figure out the average waiting time before your service is complete, or the average time you will finish serving. Or you can kind of treat each of these blocks independently and solve.